Good day, my fellow Americans and good people of the world. Today, I would like to address you in regards to the current situation. It is the responsibility of those in the highest positions of government to reflect the sensibilities of civil society and role model the best of American values. A leader's policies, rhetoric, and actions, as well as their conduct, force the legitimacies of our nation to the test in order to establish the strength of our union and the civility of our society. When bad actors with nefarious intent are elected into government, they bring out the worst in everyone. So long as the people in elected or appointed government reflect the sense that violence of any kind is okay, or is a sign of strength and power, then the moral agency of the public will have nothing holding them back from the descent into barbarism. When people in government condone violence, champion for factioning in society, and lead with the spirit of making America into a dog-eat-dog, mighty crush the weak, free-for-all hellscape, then what they will make of this nation is exactly that. A violent, factioned, undesirable place. When electing people, we the people must look at the candidate holistically. Voters must consider what a candidate thinks, what they do, what they say, what they condone, what they tolerate, what they focus on, and what they champion for. We, the people of the United States, must ask ourselves if this is the kind of example that we want at the head of our government. This person, in an elected position or appointed by an elected official, they represent all of us. They are the ones who are governing on our behalf because we hired them to do so. We gave them the authority to represent us and to intercede on our behalf and intervene or address the world on our behalf. So we must remember that we should not be electing people who condone, champion for, reflect, role model, suggest, promote, or suggest the use of violence. We must remember that violence breeds violence, and injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. If we allow corrupt government because it's led by a undisciplined person who lacks self-control, who is meant to determine the moral legitimacy of our nation, yet settles on a low standard beneath our values and ethical bounds, then what else can be concluded? But bad actors with nefarious intent leading the nation will bring out the worst in everyone, and America will not be able to become its best version. Now to talk in brief about political violence. Everyone has a different perception of their hurts, their frustrations, their dissatisfaction, their disappointments, their repulsions. They will have different ways of coping with these things, especially when it's mixed with a sense of defeatism or hopelessness, or a sense that everything is unfair, or that law is lawless, or that there's just no justice, because the world is being ran like a cartel, and all the bad actors have given us nowhere to turn. No one is there to help us to stop the bad things from happening. This is where we must hold ourselves accountable and responsible. This is where conflict resolution becomes the forefront of our considerations. We have to start looking at each other as people, as individuals, someone to care for and care about, someone to love. And I'm not talking about love in the sense of romance, or love in the sense we all hold hands and kumbaya. Talking about love for the fact that your freedom is equal to my freedom. And if you want your life to go well, and you want good things to happen for you, and you want to live in a world that's safe and sound, and you want to not have to worry, and you want to have opportunities, and you want chances for things to improve, if you want to be able to succeed, these are things you have to want for everyone else too. You have to love your life so much that you love the life and the freedom that other people have as well, because that's what assures it for you. Society is nothing but our mutual agreements with one another. And what holds a nation together is our laws, which are distinguished, legitimized, obvious, apparent, written down agreements with one another. And when we stop following through on our civic agreement of living in mutual accord with one another, things begin to fall apart. We have to look at our situation in America as being our mutual responsibility to make sure that America is a worthwhile place to call home, a place worth defending. But our way of solving for the intractability of problems when we have opposing sides that look at things differently than us is not to resort to barbarism or violence or dehumanization. The resolution is to build something together. Something that is so much bigger than any one of us alone could do. Something that represents to us how much we need one another and how we need each other at our best. Because it's only when we work together, doing our best and being our best, that any one of us are going to be able to succeed. We need each other. And as difficult it is to fathom how we could all come together to build something together, look at the prime example that has existed for near 250 years already in the form of the United States of America. We've built this nation together. It is so much bigger than any one of us alone. America is not the president. America is not the government. America is the people, each and every one of us. And we gotta love each other for that fact. That we're here and we are making this work. As challenging as it is, as frustrating as it can get from time to time, how much of a struggle it can be, how unfair it seems. All of those things make us who we are. But just because things aren't working the way we quite imagined them, or the way that we would hope they would turn out, doesn't mean we start breaking everything or resorting to our worst tendencies. We muster the courage and the strength and the personal resolve to do our best and be our best, and to encourage and champion for other people to do their best and be their best. and to empower them. And when we see people falter, we help them back up. And when we see people deviating, we correct them back into the focus of that clear intent that we all share together, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union and establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. We ordained and established the Constitution of the United States that gave us the legitimacy to call ourselves a nation. It gave us the framework by which we can establish justice every day to reconfirm for ourselves what we had promised to ourselves in the Declaration of Independence. All people are created equal and endowed by their Creator to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And governments are instituted so that we can provide the means and the modes and the methods and the capabilities to make sure that such a place exists on this earth, so that no person or group of people could oppress anyone else. A truly free nation of free and independent people. That's a responsibility that we each take on for ourselves and for each other. And we have to be able to get back to that sensibility of why we do this together, why we stay united, for us to remember what we're working towards together collectively, so we don't lose sight of how to keep ourselves in conform, aligned and attuned with our sensibilities of a righteous society, of law and order, rules and bounds, ethics and values, and people who are upright and morally legitimate. We're not expecting perfection, but just like our Constitution and our Declaration paved the way for us, we are ever more perfect. We are working towards that every day, and each and every one of us needs to take on that as a responsibility. And it can be challenging with so much hatred and cruelty and corruption and violence and abuse and terrorization, all of these negative things in the world. It is a truly challenging act to be a good person uncompromisingly. Yet it's the simplest thing to do. You just be empathetic and you consider other people. You think of them as if they are yourself. You think of them as if they're someone to be cared for and cared about. You love them, you respect them, and you appreciate them. The good, the bad, the ugly, the best of them, the worst of them, flaws and all. We have patience for one another, and we consider one another's faults and failings as learning opportunities, chances for growth. We're all in our becoming process, and we just have to have a little bit of patience with one another in that process. Give everybody a little bit of room, a little bit of space. We have to consider how we deal with one another, coming from a sense of we would want others to extend grace to us too when we make a mistake. I do believe there are many people in government right now, and it has been this way for quite some time, that are bad actors with nefarious intent. They're selfish deviants, and they are deviating away from the path and the course of our preamble promise, of our declared right, inalienable rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. These people are leading the nation into ruin. They are bringing out the worst in everybody. And they're trying to tear down all of the things that we've worked so hard together to build up, to give us better chances to be more kind with one another and patient and more accommodating, and to make more room so that all people fit in and belong and feel welcomed and are able to thrive. And it is one of the most disappointing things. It's frustrating. I myself get righteously angered when I see corrupt politicians, when I see their hypocrisy, when I see their cruelty and their indifference, when I listen to their violation of the personhood of others, when I listen to them condone violence as long as it meets and suits the ends that they would like to see accomplished. They bring out the worst in everyone because they need people at their worst. Because in that state, people are weak, and they're vulnerable, they're easy to exploit, easy to control, easy to justify using extreme measures to control them. These people are setting us up for failure as a people, as a nation. They don't deserve to be in office. And it is one of the worst examples of the vulnerabilities and the inherent weaknesses in our government, that our system is so designed that bad actors with nefarious intent can get elected and infiltrate the highest branches of government and begin to do harm to the people, to the nation, to our reputation, to dismantle our capacity to do right by the people and good for the world, as they ignore their responsibilities and their duties to care for the people, fulfill the preamble promise. Instead, they're creating policies and taking actions that become self-serving. Flagrant corruption, undermining of the rule of law, delegitimizing other people who have built up such a prestige for our nation by their very representation in the forms of government that have helped us to provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, secure the blessings of liberty, and establish justice. It's these bad actors with nefarious intent who are trying to delegitimize and nullify the good work of good people who serve this country well. But no matter what they do to us, we must never act out in anger against those who do not know any better. They know not what they do. They don't think of others. As challenging as it is our responsibility to find a way to welcome them back into, as they call it, the family of the world, and brotherhood and sisterhood. Help them find their way back into love and light and the light of reason. And we do this not by attacking them or shaming them and blaming them for their errors, but establishing corrective mechanisms, guidance, social and civic sanctioning. We have to hold ourselves to a standard of understanding that these people are underdeveloped. They're immature. They're incapable of doing the right thing. They do not know better. They don't have a way to make sense of the world. It's our responsibility to help them and encourage them and guide them to self-develop, to improve, and to correct. And if they can't, then the appropriate course of action is to make sure that they don't have the power to influence or the power to make decisions on our behalf or the authority to make decisions on our behalf. We take from them the means that they use to leverage outcomes into their favor, which is leading to bad outcomes for everyone else. We do this constructively, not destructively. We value the sanctity of all life. We have to hold ourselves to that standard. Otherwise, we reduce to barbarism. Our nation is meant to be a safe home space for free and independent people who are able to pursue their life with liberty, justice for all, and pursue their version of happiness. But that can only happen when we work together to foster the social and cultural and political paradigm, and yes, even the economic paradigm that promotes that, empowers that. And when people step out of line, we call them out. We don't silently sit by. We don't cower in fear. We don't run away from the challenge. We take it on. Straightforward. We understand that there's going to be people who take joy in their deviation. And when that happens, we have to help them to understand that if they cannot self-control, that we will control them. We will put them in the proper place by which they can't harm themselves and others. But the path and the course is not to take from them that which gives them the opportunity for redemption, which is their life and their liberty. Limitations happen because we need to set a corrective course for people. But we still have to be able to create a welcoming situation that they can see themselves belonging to, in which they can thrive, doing so in a way that is conducive to our social and civic ideals. We find ways to help to restore them to wholeness, so they no longer pursue deviation away from the course of what is good and best for everyone. and the sense of we can build something together. And that will be the means by which we can help to restore integrities, help to reunite our nation, to secure our bond with one another again, reunite to the common cause of building a nation together that includes everyone, that works for everyone, that is not to the disadvantage of anyone, and that does not leave anyone behind and doesn't keep anyone behind, and serves to make sure everybody lives the good life. It's my belief that the concept of, as they call it, idle hands, when people have nothing better to do than to say mean things and do bad things, and they get away with it without consequence, they'll continue to find distorted and perverted and cruel and violent ways to entertain themselves or to make themselves feel accomplished or important. And when we live in a society where the people in the highest positions of government project a sense of machoism and that might is right, and that it's okay to crush the weak, and then violence is a sign of power and strength and authority, they're sending that signal to the rest of us that that's okay and that's normalized. And we can't accept that and we can't tolerate that. We must move away from that sensibility and show that the only path along that course, on that continuum, is a spectacle of negative outcome consequences that ends in no good for anyone. We must diverge intentionally and assert ourselves with the hope and the promise that things can and will get better as we continue to work towards improving things together. We can move along a continuum that establishes an imperishable world peace that helps to make sure America works for everyone. And then we can set to work, and people will be so busy working towards improving the American situation in such a way that helps them and benefits them as well as others. People will have less and less time to waste in fighting about how terrible things are. And they'll begin to see things are getting better, little by little, day by day. But that improvement is reflected in our capacity to let it go when it comes to things that have happened in the past. Prevent those sorts of things from happening in the future. Shore up those weaknesses. Reconfirm our values. Assert ourselves in terms of what we will stand for as a nation and what we will not stand for as a people. And work towards the improvement of our nation together in such a way where it's not about, who did what in the past. It's about who's stepping up to the plate today and who's willing to put in the good, hard, and necessary work to make things better from here, from now on. It's not going to be an easy win over for people who have been immersed in the atmosphere of the tolerance of violence. There are many people who have perverted sensibilities that have taken a liking to being abusers and being violent and doing bad things. They profit from it. They personally benefit and gain from it. They take sick, perverse joy and thrill in it. And these are the type of people that we need to deviate from. We need to disempower them. We need to render them and their voices irrelevant to the future. This in no way means that we would cause them harm, but we are not going to help foster the chance for them to continue to do bad things and to be bad actors and to cause harm to others. We have to give the means for people to be separated from their capacity to do harm. Give them space and time to think about what they've done wrong, and invite them with welcome into a situation that they can join us in thriving, so long as they will play nice, and that they will intentionally, personally self-develop and improve, turn from the error of their ways and be better people. Seek to redeem the time. Ask for forgiveness. Say that they're sorry. It's not the easy thing to do because it takes a lot of work to shrink your ego down to size. But it's not an impossible task. It is made harder when we don't allow people the opportunity to improve. We don't give people the chance to establish a fresh start. So it's upon all of us to stop looking at each other as enemies or something to attack. We are meant to negatively and positively socially sanction one another, to remind one another what our values and our principles and the rules and our rights and our responsibilities. We have to remind each other of those things, and it's perfectly fine to call one another out on our bullshit. But what's not okay is to use somebody's mistake or error as a means to humiliate them, or to harm them and belittle them, to do violence against their personhood, which is attacking the person, attacking their spirit, trying to break them down and break their will. These are things that only cause people to treat you in the same way. It is the golden rule, after all. And we have to learn how to embody that. What you do to others will come back on you. So follow the platinum rule and treat others as they want to be treated. Consider what they want, how they want to be treated. And consider, is that how you would want to be treated? With just basic decency and respect. Valuing everyone's lives. Understanding everybody has a different starting point, and there are life lesson and their becoming process. And we all bear a little bit of patience with one another. And yes, it does seem like an oversimplification in this very toxic and very complex world. And we are living in the outcome consequences of past and prior decision making of many bad actors with nefarious intent who have done harm, significant harm, to people and to places and to things and to our way of life. And those people should be prevented from doing further harm and set on a course of correction. and making amends and doing the right thing. And we have to encourage them in that. Because it is far more of an impactful lesson to encourage people to humble themselves to learning the harsh lesson of making a mistake than it is to physically harm them or verbally harm them. Because you're causing them to adjust to a moral world. And there is nothing more excruciating for an immoral person to have to adjust themselves to a moral world. This is why they need our love and our kindness and our patience and our tolerance and our acceptance of their becoming process. And yes, they're going to need us to hold their hands too, because it's difficult. And it is far easier for them to fall back into doing wrong and being bad than it is for them to have to go through the process of grieving the loss of who they were before their old version and to transcend into new. But it doesn't have to be shameful, it doesn't have to be painful. It can be just a struggle and a challenge and difficult, uncomfortable. All change is hard, especially when it's necessary. But we have to empower them and help them through that process. Make it a little bit easier for them. Because on the other side of their self-development, their personal development, is a renewed person who is able to enter back into the human family and be a part of our lives in a positive relation with one another. They don't have to live in fear and shame or doubt or any of the other negative emotions that brings out the worst in them. It promotes the best in them. It helps them to shine their best. It helps them to understand that they are not their past and prior decisions. They are not the mistakes they've made. They are who they choose to become every single day as they move away farther and farther from who they were. On and on, moving forward into who they're becoming. And we need to give them a vision of what is to come that they can move towards, that they can aim for, knowing that they are working in the direction of moving in the right direction and doing the right thing and doing good and being good. Because maybe they don't understand what it looks like to do the right thing or what it feels like to do the right thing. They may not understand what it's going to take. They're going to need from us a sensible guide to get them through. And for them to feel respected in that process, not belittled, not treated like they're stupid or they're ignorant. They made a mistake. The conflict that exists between us reconciling who we were as a society or who we were as a person when we were our worst versions, and our understanding of who we are now and what we must do to become a better version of ourselves, that simple misunderstanding is the hurdle, the challenge, the thing that we must overcome. And that's the thing that we can work on together. We can help one another realize that we just have to understand that sometimes bad things happen. And karma, in the karmatic retribution of time, things will come out to bear the consequences of our past and prior decision making. And all we can do is to try to learn the lesson along the way before time comes a-calling, so that we can lessen the impact of the negative outcome consequences. We can transcend the bad karma and turn it into good karma. This is an active process, an intentional process that we must take on. Not just as individuals who have made the worst mistakes, but as each and every one of us make mistakes every single day. We're human. To err is human. And we have to take on that responsibility of that our mistakes are going to have consequences, and we have to face them responsibly. We have to face them together, and we got to help one another to get through them, to lessen the impact, ease the burden, reduce the struggle, and help to transmute a negative into a positive. It's a becoming process. It's transformative. It's a way of looking at things that, maybe doesn't right now exist in the ways that we would like it to be. But all that really represents is not an utter failure and a total give up and burn it all to the ground and start from scratch. No, it represents the opportunity for us to develop and improve, to overcome. It's a way to establish fortification, fortitude, and resilience, a sense of sympathy and understanding as well. Just like any intelligent system, it's usually making mistakes that help us to learn the greatest lessons. And trial and error. But the point is to keep it within reason and bounds, so that we can stay in accordance with one another in terms of we're trying to live in civil society with one another. We all belong. We may not necessarily belong right next door to one another. We may not be able to be in close proximity with everybody, but we all do belong. And the point is to respect that and to create safe space for everybody to exist and be true to who they are. Just as long as you're not infringing on somebody else's life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, we should all just get along just fine. But because people are imperfect and they make mistakes, and we do react to things mostly emotionally, and we're not going to sit here and try to create laws that restrict human emotion. The best we can do is to create laws to reduce the harm of our worst tendencies and to promote and encourage opportunities for people to bring out their best and do their best and be their best. And those are the sorts of things that prevent us from doing the bad things that we are capable of. And to prevent us from, going wrong when things go wrong. There's going to be times when bad actors with nefarious intent are going to get away with their worst tendencies. In time, it will be corrected as society discovers the error and works together to correct for it. But in the meantime, it's important for us to understand how these things happened and find ways to shore up those weaknesses. Establish new codes of ethics and standards of morals and new legitimacies by which we can conform to. And we need to dialogue and keep up the constant conversation with one another in order to reaffirm to one another what are our social and civic ideals. We need to inculcate them. We need to reinforce them. We need to give opportunities for people to change their mind and make different choices. And to, if necessary, be constrained or limited in their capacity to do harm until they realize the error of their ways and start making corrective steps towards self-improvement and self-development and reconformity, unification, aligning and attuning with that which is our social and civic ideals. We have to take it on as a personal, social, and cultural discipline to do our best and be our best, not punitive punishment, because that is the sort of thing that brings out the worst in us. Now I want to speak in brief in regards to the prevalence of gun violence in the United States of America. As I see it, I believe that 2A is part of the preamble promise of provide for the common defense. It is an important right that we really need to start considering in terms of it also coming with responsibilities. Because gun violence is a significant problem in America. And our government needs to start working towards solving for the intractability of that problem. And the best way to do that is to work towards respecting that right and giving it more legitimacy in terms of giving it the moral and ethical standards of rules and regulations that help to make sure that those who are empowered by that right are not enabled to do the wrong thing given that right. And I believe the best way to approach this is to establish a licensing requirement for all individuals who possess a gun. In order to possess a gun, to wield a gun, to burnish a gun, to fire a gun, you have to have gone through gun safety training and to be permitted and licensed to be able to even handle a gun. And in that way, we can ensure that people understand the awesome responsibility that comes with having this power to potentially cause harm and to have the instillment of the sensibilities between right and wrong, not just to assume that they know, not to just expect that they're going to follow a law, given they may or may not be made aware of it. We have to give them a sensible conscience, and the best way to do that is to establish lessons to help to inculcate those social and civic ideals of the rights and responsibilities of gun ownership, and how to be a good gun owner and a safe operator of a gun, and how to respond and react to the negative outcome consequences of misuse of guns or the accidental use of guns that end up resulting in the harm of individuals. Once you've taken an immersive learning experience to really understand the awesome power that gun ownership represents, then at that point in time, you can be deemed responsible enough to be placed with that right. And then further going to require that people undergo evaluations of their mental health and well-being to make sure that they are able to make informed, intelligent, conscious, aware decisions about their use of a gun, and to help to have early warning detections against people who may choose to use a gun towards negative ends or criminal ends. And for there to be early detection programs within society and reporting authorities that individuals who are concerned about their safety or the safety of others in regards to a person who possesses, owns, or is in the use of a gun, for there to be legitimate authorities that can intervene or intercede on behalf of the public good if there is a potential threat that is posed by an individual who may be unable to self-control, so that they do not use a gun in an unlawful way. And when we require guns to have serial numbers that are matched with the serial number of a gun case, in this sense, we know that at all times that firearms are locked away and kept safe, away from individuals who are not prepared and licensed and able to safely use a gun. This will prevent guns from falling into the hands of the wrong people. It will prevent gun accidents. It will also help us to better keep track of when a gun is used in a crime. It will help us to establish accountability when a gun is used in a crime. And allowing for background checks and to establish a waiting period between the purchase of a gun, the application for a gun, and the actual purchase of a gun. And helping to create an entire campaign of public service announcements that help people to understand gun safety and the realities of having a society that does have the right of the Second Amendment. And to also help to improve the safety of our public spaces, to ensure that they are designed to adequately, appropriately, and proactively and swiftly respond to active shooter events, and in such a way deter individuals from assuming that they could do mass shooting events at public venues, because it will become conscious in the public conscious, the sense that we have heightened security and precautionary measures that prevent these sorts of events from being able to be successful. And then we need to change our rhetoric around gun violence and stop giving legitimacy to those who are conducting that violence. What is far more important to understand than the inner workings of a distorted mind that has led to do violence against others using a gun, what is far more important is to recognize the potential for such harmful acts, the potential for people to become bad actors in this way, so that it grows our consciousness to understand that we need to do more work to prevent these things. We need to have more social inclusion. We need to do more to give people a sense that there are more constructive outlets for their rage or their anger or their sense of injustice or unfairness. We also need to embrace the sense of holistic healthcare, which includes mental health, and embrace it as a positive way to help to maintain your human, to take care of yourself. It's an important part of self-care. And when we promote that, it lessens the capacity for things to get worse for people or for them to be led to the point where they would make bad choices. Society needs to keep in our conscience that we are working towards creating safe space for everyone. And when we see people are slipping from their capacity to self-control, then we need to have authorities that can intervene on behalf of that individual and the collective best interest to help set them right so that they don't go wrong and do the wrong thing. And we need to embrace healthcare systems and make them robust in our society. They should be a part of our entire development process. Our schools and our education system from the get should be about human development, how to be a good person, uncompromisingly, how to take care of yourself, your self-care including your mental health, and how to develop appropriately to establish modern, Western, American-made versions of rites of passage to help young minds to develop into adulthood and go through the process of understanding the evolution of their maturity, to take on the burdens of their newfound responsibilities, and to fully integrate into society in wholeness and completeness, and to take on the challenge of personal development as a part of the wonderful adventure of life. It's a part of your becoming process. And when we promote an education system that helps to foster the personal and self-development of every individual from childhood through adulthood and into old age, we're fostering a sense of people being able to be whole and centered and self-controlled and self-made and upheld to the values and standards of becoming their best version without comparing and contrasting them to some external ideology of what deems success or what deems you manly or what deems you a woman. But those values are intrinsic and developed within and in accordance with your sensibilities of a soul-print alignment. And that you establish your sensibilities of right and wrong and having a conscience and a moral guide and personal principles, development of your character, formation of your personality and adherence to personal principles. Those things, as we promote a society that allows for people to foster their own way of being that is in accordance with our social and civic ideals, then we will churn out much more happy, healthy people. And we will have far less violence and cruelty in society. And so when we take on a holistic approach of understanding that gun violence is more of a symptom of the worst capacities of human behavior and tendencies, and that it is conditioned by past and prior decision making, it's conditioned by our moral legitimacies, it's conditioned by our laws and our rules, it's conditioned by environments, it's conditioned on how somebody is raised, it's conditioned on their sensibilities of a home space from childhood throughout their lives. All of these things we have to approach in a holistic way in order to appropriately address how gun violence has become such a prevalent problem in our society. You look at it very much like a vehicle, a 5,000, pound death machine if put into the wrong hands. But in the hands of a responsible, well-trained, experienced individual who understands there's rules of the road, there's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things, it becomes a helpful instrument for us to be able to fulfill our capacity to be mobile in society, and that's a good thing. And our Second Amendment is important to our society because it, again, fulfills our preamble promise of provide for the common defense. We should want to have as many people who feel comfortable with being gun owners to want to become gun owners and to become versed in how to use a gun, for the sensibility of that we should always want to have many people in America capable of taking up arms in defense when it's necessary. Because we have to understand, in a very contentious world, we never know what could or may happen. We would not want to lose the important capacity to defend ourselves if called to serve, if we needed to. And so it's important for people to have the capacity and the capability to be a gun owner, so if called upon, they can provide for the common defense. But it's important to make sure that people understand all of the responsibilities that come with that right, and to foster a sensibility in society that we don't have to be living in fear of gun violence. Because our right to gun ownership should never infringe upon our domestic tranquility. If anything, don't you see how our preamble promise are self-reinforcing? We promote the general welfare, we secure the blessings of liberty, we provide for the common defense. These things are mutually reinforcing. They're there to help to make sure that everything is fine, so that we can live in domestic tranquility, because we have a sensibility that we have these rights and we have these responsibilities, because we know what it's going to take in order to secure this thriving situation for everyone. So I don't see it as something that we have to attack or to remove. It's a tremendous undertaking, but it's our duty as people who want to live in a civil society to start doing the right thing in terms of fostering the environment in which violence is not prevalent, where gun violence is a very minor probability in potential outcomes. But understanding this is not something we can wholly completely eliminate. But just like I believe with every other right, we don't prevent the perversion of something, or the potential for bad to happen, by limiting our liberties or our freedoms or incapacitating ourselves from living the good life in order to confine ourselves in some limitation to say that the only way to keep us safe is to have over-asserted controls. We need rules, we need bounds, we need regulations, we need laws. But they all need to be just, fair, reasonable, right. They need to be suited to the needs of now. And laws should exist, rules should exist, norms should exist that are befit the times. And as times change, we have to adopt new orientations to our social ontology, our way of life, and our way of communicating with one another and relating to one another. But we should always be having the goal of making this place a safe home space of belonging for all people. And we do that not by limiting our capacity to be free and independent people. We made this nation so we can be free and independent. But we also need to understand that humans are humans, and they have the capacity to do bad as much as they have capacity to do good. And it is hard to promote people to do good if we have a system that incentivizes or allows for or champions for people to do bad. So it's up to us to constantly reinforce, socially and civically inculcate our social and civic ideals. Create laws and rules that help us to better enforce consequence when people deviate from what is considered civil society. And find ways to establish corrective measures to get people back in alignment with being good people, doing the right thing. And always approaching it in a sense of there is room for redemption and restoration of integrities for all people. Nobody's irredeemable, even the worst of us. Some people need a little bit more control, and some people have the capacity to just self-develop and self-improve. And that's why we need to accommodate the administration of a society that allows for the liberty and freedom of everybody as much as they grant themselves worthy of having that liberty and freedom. I think it's also important to establish a consequence in terms of those who allow for the distribution or the creation of black market or non-serialed weapons. And we need to have strict enforcement to prevent those, because of the fact that there's no way to know who is being empowered by these dark forces and dark systems. And that allows for the opportunity of bad actors with nefarious intent to subvert our systems of establishing order and justice. And so in that sense, we must work together with intention to break down the power structures that allow for these sorts of dark market systems to exist and to conduct business. And we need to work towards preventing the capacity for people to create weapons on their own. There is a bunch of work to do in order to create a safe America in which we can respect, the Second Amendment, but also protect and preserve life and prevent the prevalence of gun violence. It's a mighty task, but it is not impossible. We just have to choose for ourselves that this is what we need to do. And we either do this with intention and have a very public, very transparent process of, reimagining, rebuilding, and reestablishing these sorts of social ideals within our infrastructures and our social ontology. It's going to take work, intentional work, to make it happen. But it's much better to invest ourselves in doing what is right than it is for us to constantly have to suffer the negative outcome consequences of bad actors with nefarious intent seeking to do harm and violating the innocence of all people. We should be able to live with a peace of mind that we don't have to fear one another. And it may sound optimistically naive that within each and every one of us is a good person, but it's true. And I fundamentally believe that all it takes is just the right person to bring out the best in others. I do not believe that the current President of the United States of America, POTUS 47, I do not believe this person is capable of bringing out the best in anyone. I have seen from their time since they've entered the political stage and become a public figure that seems to be inescapable from the public narrative, that he has brought out the worst in everyone. America is worse off having misplaced trust in him. Our nation is struggling in its capacity to do right by the people and to do good for the world. Our American prestige has been undermined and eroded. Our sense of right and wrong has been distorted and perverted. Our public discourse has been dumbed down and rendered violent. And there's so many people that have been allowed to fundamentally ruin other people's lives based off of the fact that they have a different type of political ideology. There has been a cruelty in our public discourse, violence, mockery, humiliation. We're seeing people intentionally try to degrade one another, dehumanize. These are all things that have been role modeled and reflected in the behavior and the character of POTUS 47, even as he was POTUS 45. I fundamentally believe he is a bad actor with nefarious intent who does not deserve our trust. He is unbecoming of the office of president. He's not doing right by the people. He's leading the nation into ruin. He's running the entire government like it's a cartel. He's skewing outcomes to personally favor himself, his family, and his fellow deviants. But even with all of these things that I disagree with about him, all of the things that I find repulsive about him, all of the things about him that I do not like, and all the ways that I pity this man, and all the ways that he makes me disappointed in him, never do I ever think of him in terms of wishing ill will to him. The worst that I want for him is for him to face the consequences of his actions in terms of legal recourse. I want him to be held accountable for his corruption. I want him to have to face the people who he has victimized and he has harmed, and for those people to be able to explain to him the depths of the pain and the hurt that he has caused them, so that he has to consciously resolve that within himself. I want him to feel a sense that he cannot hide from the shame that he's brought upon himself, from the mistakes that he has made intentionally, knowingly. And not because I want him to do harm or to be harmed, but I just want him to choose to self-improve. I want him to understand that there's consequences to his actions. I want him to have to struggle with reconciling all that he has chosen to do with his life. And I know that will be a painful process for him. I see his response of his ego's worthless defense every time he feels like somebody's coming to critique him when he's done something, out of the norm, or something that is fundamentally wrong, or things that violate the law. He strikes out at others, and he defends his ego and the limits of what he's willing to do in order to retaliate against the people who cause him harm. It's very low. And I believe he needs to learn the valuable lesson of self-control. I think he needs to feel that discomfort of being called to redeem the time. And I know that eventually he will feel this way. And I want at that time for the graces to be with him. And I want each and every one of us to willingly offer him grace to help him to improve. To not take the need for the punitive approach. We should set the example of what society should be about as corrective, developmental, restoration of integrities. To look at everybody as having everything within them in potential for redemption, and to welcome them into that situation. But this isn't like Sunday and you go and you confess your sins and then come Monday you're back at it again, doing the wrong thing. I want for POTUS 47 and the bad actors with nefarious intent who have followed him into government, and those who surround themselves in his isolated pocket of thriving, who are also bad actors with nefarious intent, who are self-serving deviants. I just want them to be welcomed back into the family of good humanity, to accept the error of their ways and choose to become better and start doing the right thing. Leave their old versions behind and renew themselves, redeem themselves. and for all of us to find the capacity in our hearts to accept them on the terms and the conditions of, all we want for them is just to do the right thing, to be good people uncompromisingly, to live up to the prestige of their roles, to be deserving of our love and admiration that they think that they're so entitled to. I fundamentally believe that POTUS 47 is President Pandemonium. He is pulling America along a line of a continuum of an spectacle, always a spectacle with him, of just negative outcome consequences. And so many people are being hurt by him, unnecessarily. And while I do believe a lot of it is intentional infliction of harm, a lot of it is unintentional. It's just from lack of care or consciousness or consideration. And so while there are many of us that have grievances, we've been done wrong, we've been hurt, we've been led to ruin, we've been damaged. Some people have even lost their lives because of this president. But none of that gives us the right to act out against him, because he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't understand what he's doing to others. And to the extent that he does understand, he doesn't have the conscience that could override his ego's need to defend. And so, therefore, he will constantly block out any sense of critiquing or offerings of him to set things right or to do the right thing. He's constantly on the defensive. He's not prepared to take on the tremendous responsibility of being president. But he is the president. We made a mistake as a society by electing this person. And because of that, we all have to do the work to reconcile this challenging predicament that we've put ourselves into. We don't solve for that by trying to eliminate him or cause him harm. We do it by turning up the volume of his conscience. Because as loud as that man's ego is, conscience can still override it, to the point where it will be echoing to him so loudly all of the things that he is doing wrong that he will not be able to escape it. And eventually, his will to hurt others and harm others in order to prevent himself from accepting his mistake, he'll eventually break. And in that moment, he will submit himself to the authority that's much higher than any one of us alone can provide. It's the moral authority of a moral society that exists within ethical bounds and has legitimate laws and rules and norms. And that becomes so loud, it becomes intolerable for him to continue to listen to his ego and operate from his ego and to defend his ego. It will become indefensible. And he'll find himself in a position where he has to submit to karma. And what I hope for is that'll be enough to soften his hardened heart. Make him feel again what it's like to care about other people and to choose to finally put the American people first, before himself and his family and his fellow deviants. That he chooses to do right by the American people. And to fess up that he has no idea what he's doing. To admit that he has no plans to make America great. He doesn't understand what America is. So he has no understanding of how it could be improved upon. And I believe he has the potential to be redeemed in the sense of him admitting his ignorance when it comes to those sorts of things. And that's when we, the people, could finally stand by his side and say, it's okay, you don't have to do this alone. We're here too. We are capable individuals. We love this nation and we want to see it succeed. We want it to thrive. You know, we want America to be great and grand and excellent. We don't want to see it fail. And we don't want you to fail. Because you're all that we have right now. You are our one and only POTUS. And as such, we need you at your best. But we need you to also recognize the potential in us and empower us to do the good work that we can to help to make America great. And not because it's following some weird ideological movement that is based in racism or misogyny or supremacy or violence and cruelty. No, abandon all of that. It's meaningless. It's already falling apart because it was never made of integrity, and all things not made of integrity eventually fall apart. Instead, focus on, the basic principles of the United States, our founding principles. What an opportunity we have right now. 250 years our nation has existed. I mean, wow. Look at everything that we've managed to accomplish in that time. We have become so much better. Shady decisions of the past, a lot of bad things we've had to overcome, still a lot of work to be done, but man, we're doing it, and we're doing it together. And if we didn't step on our own toes and shoot ourselves in our own feet and stand in our own way and undo a lot of the good work that we've done and spend so much time, breath, energy, focusing on the wrong things or limiting our capacity to evolve and improve, man, if we just would let ourselves be truly great, we could do amazing things. We would be so much more advanced than we are right now. We would be phenomenal. Our capacity to be a people others would look at us with such envy. And not envy in a sense of, wanting to be like this, like us, or to want to harm us, to knock us down a notch, but envy in a sense of man, look what happens when people come together and they figure it out, that we're all in this together, and they just start working on one thing together, with intention. It's the one thing that is worth us all working on. We would be able to show everyone what we're capable of as a nation if we just got on the same page with that sensibility. But we already did that. We did that when we got on the same page with the Declaration of Independence 250 years ago. We did that when we got on the same page of the Constitution of the United States of America. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to get back to the basics. And all it would take for POTUS 47 to make America great is just to understand how great we are when we adhere to the sensibilities of why we became a nation to begin with. We were trying to, free ourselves from the kind of craziness that he's trying to enforce upon us right now. Let all that go. That stuff doesn't work in America, man. It might for a little while just because you have the power and authority, but eventually it'll fall apart because America won't stand for it. Get back to the basics, focus on the fundamentals, let's work towards the preamble promise. Understand that, life, liberty, pursuit of a happiness, that's for everybody. And our nation isn't about, superiority or to, compete with anybody. We're just trying to compete with our founding fathers and the best hope that those ancestors had for us. We have to focus on this sense of, we may not have the right leadership right now. And the chances of them self-correcting and improving are limited. But there's still hope and there's potential. And if we focus on that in a sense of, not being optimistically naive and expecting, a miracle to happen, but understanding like we should always be open to the possibilities, keep an open mind and heart at the fact that like we should want for that to be the outcome that is most probable. And the probability of it, the chances of it increases as we choose to focus on it and believe in it. Believe that, everything will work out in the end. Everything's going to be all right. And encourage and invite everybody into being a part of the process of setting things right, including POTUS 47 and his entire administration. And while I have understanding of, the pragmatic reality of things, operating off of facts, not fiction, truth, not lies, as much as I hope for and want for the best in those people to be brought out in them and for them to start doing right by the people and good for the world, the chances of that are not likely. And because of that, the point is to focus on that being the thing that we would want to have happen. But just because we want that to happen doesn't mean it's going to happen. But what it is going to do is to reaffirm for us our values, help to set a common standard of our sensibilities of what is right, what is wrong, and what is expected of the authorities that we assume in our society. So that as we open ourselves up to the possibilities of this upcoming election, this year is an election year. This is the midterms. And there's so much opportunity in this crisis that we're in to see these obstacles that are before us as not being insurmountable, but opportunities to do the right thing at the right time in the right way for the right reasons. And to embrace fully the sense of like, we want an enduring America. We want an America of our highest ideals. We want to become our best version. We want to get these bad actors with nefarious intent out of office so they can't mess things up anymore, and set them on a path of self-correction and personal development and, if need be, yes, corrective mechanisms of the law. Again, not to be punitive, but corrective. Discipline, not punishment. So that we don't have to worry about those people who are so aligned with those bad actors that they would have any cause or need to rise up in retaliation. We are just putting these people in timeout and separating them from the levers of power so they can't do more harm to people. Allow them to find a different way to exist in the world and encourage them to do better and be better. Render them obsolete. Make sure that everybody knows that type of political way of being is irrelevant to the future that we're building, because we see how bad things have gotten and how bad they can be. And now we're going to have to do the good, hard, and necessary work to shore up those types of weaknesses so they don't happen again in our nation. The founding fathers knew that there was potential for this to happen, but what they couldn't see was how to fix it. But not in a sense that they didn't consider, what would be in the realm of possibility to fix it. But more, I think, in the sense of the intent that this was a living document that was going to be evolving with the people. That the type of corrective mechanism that would be necessary to prevent this sort of harm was only going to really be understood and realized once the mistake was made, down the line, in the future, when things were definitely going to change. They were going to improve and evolve from the great start that they gave to us, so they knew that people of our time would be better equipped to be able to respond to that type of, out of control deviation. And guess what? We are much better equipped now. Our systems are failing, but many are still holding. And we have, risk of there being excessive use of force and abuse of power to try to limit our capacity to have a free and fair election. But we recognize that, and so many good people are working hard to make sure that our elections still happen and they're integrity bound. And I'm proud of everybody who's investing themselves in accomplishing that. This is good work, necessary work. But we have the capacity to elect people into office that will help us to start establishing corrective mechanisms within the fundamental structures of government to help to prevent this sort of corruption and concentration of power and cartel-like governance from ever happening again. I believe the best way to approach this is for us to embrace the capacity of having a more direct democracy. This was something that the Founding Fathers themselves considered, ways that might be able to be approached, but they couldn't quite figure out the means to make it viable back in their time, seeing as there was so many limits to how do you assemble and empower and mobilize an entire population of so many people. It seemed like an impossible task of how do you create connectivity amongst all people so that they can be active participants and contributors to government. They couldn't see a way to do that on a long-term, consistent, integral basis in terms of how the government would function and operate beyond the terms and conditions of an election, where we can make everybody come together at certain times to help to make shared and common decisions together in terms of who is going to represent us. And we've managed to do that with quite a bit of success for a very long time. But they had envisioned that the people would be empowered to do more. But the capacity to mobilize people and connect people just wasn't there. But things have changed. We are a more malleable, adaptable, mobile, efficient, and well-connected society. We have the capacity to establish an official fourth branch of government in the form of civics that fully integrates the American people into governance to allow for an additional separation of powers that can help to overlap into the other branches of government, so that they have the capacity to interject a corrective mechanism or an anti-corruption mechanism when one branch of the government is going astray from that which is conducive to the best interest of society as a whole, or that individuals become corruptive or seeking personal ends. We would have the capacity as the American people to stop that sort of corruption or concentration of power or perversion of power and authority before it got out of hand. We would have the inner workings. We would have our foot in the door, would be a seat at a table. We would have the leverage that would be necessary to put a stop to the corruption before it got out of hand. And it empowers people with more agency. And that will solve for a lot of our political infighting, because people will have a way to make sure that their voice translates into affirmative action, into the determinations of how our nation is going to be led and governed. And I think if we look in terms of electing individuals that would be at least open to consider how that might be able to be implemented in society, because we recognize something has to be done to prevent this sort of corruption that we're experiencing now from ever being able to take root again. And we're not going to be able to entrust that it's just a matter of electing good people or better candidates. Yes, we do need to intentionally do due diligence so that we elect better people. And we should probably be setting a lot of very publicly transparent standards to prevent bad actors from nefarious intent from formulating legitimacy enough that they could be a potential candidate. But it's not enough to trust that people that we place trust in are going to do right by the people. We see it with POTUS 47, who made many campaign promises that he's intentionally going against. And going against in such a way where he's lashing out at people who are calling him out on his hypocrisy and his lies and his failures, instead of correcting for it. And there's no way to know what variables change once you get into office that may make it so that the things that you intended to accomplish on the campaign trail were just not as viable or feasible given some, random occurrence or some inserting of chaos or, the resistance of other, political entities that prevent you from succeeding. We saw a lot of that happen with President Obama. There was a lot of resistance to any sort of improvements of the system, and so America was effectively held back from making substantial improvements. We were only allowed to make incremental improvements, and many of those things have been torn away since then by, the selfishness and the envy of POTUS 47, who can't stand for anybody else to be successful. And so he tears down other people's successes in order to make it appear like it's more important that he has the power to take away those successes than it was for the fact that America was benefiting from them. But to know that even if we vet, candidates and we seek to have the best people, it doesn't always mean that they're going to uphold to their campaign promises. And in that case, we need to understand there has to be a way to prevent them from acting upon their worst tendencies. And that's where another separation of power really comes in handy, especially because we see right now court systems that are being stacked with, conservative-leaning judges, and we have a Congress that is more leaning towards conservative. The Republicans are in the majority, and the executive branch is headed by a Republican. And in this circumstance, we have a concentration of power into a single political entity. that means that the outcomes for the nation are skewed towards only orienting towards the accomplishment of things that are suited towards that particular movement's agenda. And so the things that other people need that are not a part of that political party are not having their needs fulfilled. And if we had a civics branch of government, the American people, regardless of political affiliation or lack thereof, would have a say in how the government would be responsive to the people and to, serve on behalf of the people, not on behalf of the party, so that the needs of the people are met regardless of which person is in power and whether they're affiliated to this, that, or no political party. The government is supposed to be working for the people and to the benefit of the people in the society. And when people themselves have a seat in government and leverage to be able to make a difference, then we can start to see our government working more optimally towards the collective best interest of the greater good. And I think that this will also serve such a tremendously beneficial purpose of helping people who may be experiencing this fear, uncertainty, confusion, doubt, anger about the way things are going. It would give them a constructive outlet that is more than just holding up a sign in protest, but is conservative enough and reasonable enough that people don't resort to violence. It's a sense that we have a way to work out our problems and solve for the intractability of problems and work out our differences and have a legitimate platform by which we can dialogue and debate in a constructive way, so that we know that when things are going wrong, we can set things right. And we do that at the ballot box when we vote, and we also do that when we serve our country and the civics branch of government. As a relevant stakeholder at the table, voicing our opinion, offering legitimate problem-solving mechanisms, ways we can innovate our problems out, agreeing mutually what we're willing to do, how we can concede and build up consensus together. And those are the sorts of things where, we'll have differences and we're going to have conflicting interests. And some of us are going to be irritated or frustrated by, the way that other people just act and behave and approach problem solving. But never to the point where we think that the solution to that would be resorting to barbarism. But we know we have a practical means to redress our grievances. It gives people a sense of agency that we don't have right now, that feeds into this sense that people feel helpless and hopeless. And then when left to their own devices, they will do things, even things that are extreme, things that they probably otherwise wouldn't do if they knew that there was a better way. And this is a way of providing a path of recourse that is fair, just, reasonable, right, legitimate. A way for us to work out our problems and our issues amongst one another in civil society, but also how to solve for the prevalence of corruption in our government, how to get the government to be responsive to the needs of the people, to actually legitimately govern on our behalf. We would have the mechanization within the structures of government itself for the people to will the government to serve on their behalf, to do the right thing. I think that taking the approach that there are ways to solve for this in a constructive way is, it has the potential to be healing for our nation. It has a way for us to look at it in terms of, we are not always going to get along, and we are not always going to be able to see eye to eye. Everybody has a different, piece of the puzzle, but everybody fits and belongs. And we need to focus on not, arguing about who's right, but focus rather on what's right. And to recommit ourselves to, this pledge and this oath that we have all consciously been, raised in to believe that we are a part of, that we are responsible for, this sense of, our nation is, us. And we are obligated to one another to live in accordance with the sensibilities of civil society. A democratic republic of independent people, a free nation, the leader of the free world. Understanding that all of those labels and those, things that we used to be able to call ourselves by and consider ourselves as have been diminished, but we can recover and restore that. We can restore our nation to wholeness, but we have to do it in a constructive way. And it's not going to just come by, the next election cycle, because there's still going to be limits to what our existing government structure is going to be able to do to solve for the problems that have become obviously apparent, needing to have the corrective mechanisms to solve for. These problems that we are experiencing right now are very big, and so we need to do something profoundly different in order to set things right. But if we work towards establishing what that's going to look like and how it's going to function and work, we're building the nation together. And that'll help us to sort out a lot of our differences. It'll help us to be able to put petty infighting aside. Like, that's not worth our time. And we will be so busy working on this together that people will have less time to build up this pent-up frustration that they then go and exert out in destructive ways. We could change the moral tone of our society simply by applying ourselves to, doing something together as a collective that is for mutual interest, mutual benefits, and mutual securities. And doing so with the mutual respect that we're all American and we're all in this together. This has to be about our collective best interest and how we're going to move forward and move beyond all of this dysfunction that we're experiencing right now, because nothing's working right for anybody, And for those people who may be gaining the advantage off of the chaos and the pandemonium right now, eventually, things are going to catch up with them too. And so we should want for us to do the best we can right now to create coherence within our society. to establish consensus, determine what we're going to work towards together that is no longer based off of political ideologies, but rather the ideals of our highest ideals, of the America of our highest ideals. And focus on those sorts of things, so people don't feel helpless and hopeless. So people don't choose to resort to violence. And now I wanted to speak in brief in regards to those people who were impacted by the violent event that occurred on the 25th of April this year. I'm not going to make any assumptions that I would be able to fully comprehend what you are now having to process. But I have been sincerely seeking to be as empathetic as I can. I'm very well practiced in this capacity, as every time there is a bout of gun violence that reaches the main stage of our media streams, I take time to stop and to consider and to seek to understand. And as I choose to respond and give my insights regarding it, I seek to be understood, so that people know that I am a caring and compassionate person by nature, and that I naturally empathize with others. It's a part of my soul print values. It is a tremendous blessing and a burden, but one that I take with a tremendous amount of pride and humility and patience. As I seek to sympathize with you, as I sympathize with many other individuals who have been involved in gun violence, mass shootings, or potential mass shootings. My understanding is that this is a traumatic event for you. No matter how you're taking it in, whether you are being strong or allowing yourself to be weak, whether you are putting on, a smile and grinning through it, or if you're crying in your pillow at night, whether you are angry and frustrated and confused and just trying to make sense of it all. What you're going to be encountering is the grieving process. Your innocence has been violated and lost to an extent. And as hard as it might seem to wrap your head around, the fact is that you did not know what this feeling feels like until you feel it. You did not know of such fear. You did not know of such pain. You did not know of such emotions and such depth. But now you do. And even though many of you have devoted your lives to reporting on such things, and there is a possibility that many of you have experienced something likened to this, or even much worse, even still, there's a part of you, of your innocence, that has been lost and violated in this circumstance. You are gathering together to celebrate the empowerment of your careers, what you dedicate your lives to. The most prevalent and important right that is protected constitutionally in our United States of America, one of the most fundamental principles to freedom and liberty, is the right to free speech and free press. You were there celebrating your successes, sharing in your camaraderie, getting a sense of how profound your field is, the extent of all of the actors that make it possible, all of the individual personalities and characters and the agencies of those people, the platforms that you have and you provide and you utilize, all of your companies that allow you to exist and to keep you in a careered position, all of your listeners and your readers and your followers, those that turn to you for a beacon of truth and trust in you and your voice, and they believe in your message. Everything that you spent the evening celebrating was in an instance disrespected and rendered in that moment both irrelevant and vital, in a sense that in the grand scheme of your lives being at risk of harm and potentially death, in that moment what was most important was your life and the preservation of it. And so many of you kicked into gear to do what you do best and started reporting about the facts on the ground as you were experiencing it. And you gave us, as you always do, a great window into experience to understand this happens in our world. And we have to find ways to make sense of it, and the best way to do it is to get firsthand account of it and to reveal the truth and reality of things as they are. In this moment, you were violated in your sensibilities, that you thought that was a safe space for you all to be in and to congregate and to celebrate and respect one another. That was taken from you in that moment. Your night was denied of you because of the actions of one mindless radical and in that way, and for all the ways that your innocence that night, who thought you were just there to gather, to do good and be amongst one another, united for a positive cause, one of the best parts of our nation, our First Amendment, free press, free speech. And that was violated. And there's fear and there's a sense of terror and traumatization that comes with that. And so you're going to be entering a grieving process. For some people, it will be much easier to process. Some people have the built-in coping mechanisms. Some are just more resilient. Others, it's going to take some more time. And in that sense, I am being sympathetic of understanding that what you're going through, while it may be different in terms and conditions of the historical, situational, and fine context, it still remains the same. Grieving is hard. And I'm sorry that you have to go through this process. But you don't have to do it alone. And I believe in your capacity to heal through the process of continuing to do your good work. And that'll help you to find your way through to the other side, where you can finally come into acceptance of, although this did happen, that the only thing that it changes is your sense that you got this. And that everything's going to be all right. And you're going to continue to do your good work. And hopefully it inspired you to be more honest and truthful, integrity bound, to be more proud of what you do, and to understand the importance of what you do for society to help us to remain free. And I'm sure you will grow and improve from this experience. But all the ways that it's going to be painful and difficult, I'm sorry that you have to experience that. It should have been a beautiful, wonderful night of celebration, and that was denied to you, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry that that's the state of our nation right now. And I hope that you'd be willing to work along with the rest of us to seek to find best practices and ways that we can improve and move forward in a positive direction so that we can shore up the weaknesses and prevent these sorts of things from happening again. And a lot of that's going to come from you all doing your part to, dispel disinformation and misinformation, to help to give truth, fact-based reality that everybody can touch grass on, so that people are less prone to being radicalized, and to understand that it is your responsibility to report on facts of the way things are, and to call out bad actors with nefarious intent when they do wrong things. But really try to understand that words mean things, and your words can either influence people for good or for ill, and just take that into account in all that you do. And as for the government officials that were present as well, I hope that this is been an enlightening experience for you to understand that not everybody's in agreement with the things that you're doing or the way you're going about doing your jobs. And I don't think it should take an instance of potential political violence in order for you guys to start considering the will of the people and start doing right by the people. You're making a lot of mistakes, and it's hurting a lot of people, including yourselves. I don't want you to have to live in a political environment where you have to worry about your safety. I think that public service is so important that it should be a respected and prestigious position by which all people in America respect and honor it. And that's why it's partly your duty to make sure you reflect that these positions are prestigious that they do reflect the best of us, that they are integrity bound, that they are guided and oriented from a moral legitimacy, and they're conformed to ethical bounds, and they follow the rules and the norms and the laws, and they only break them when it's necessary and it's justified and it's reasonable and it's fair and it's conducive to the best interest of everybody involved, and that it will build our nation up better. And understand the responsibility that you have for every politician to come. We don't want people to think that the only way that they can get the government to be responsive to the people is if they lash out in retaliation. Our government should be responsive to the people so that they know and they understand they're being seen, they're being heard, they're being understood, they're being taken into consideration, and they're being cared for. It's your duty and your obligation to the people to serve the people, not your selfish ends. And you're setting up this nation for failure by failing to live up to the expectations that we have that those who are in office are going to be good people. I pray for your grieving process to be a healing balm, and that your families are set at ease, knowing how hard it must be for them as well to know that you're a public servant and you're constantly in the public eye and under public scrutiny. In a contentious political environment, your job becomes more dangerous, and I'm sure your family's worried for you. I'm worried for you. I don't want you to live in fear, because then you can't be your best and do your best so that you can serve our collective best interests. I want you to have the sensibility that we live in a society where political violence is not a default response to settling our differences. I want you to take extreme ownership for your duties and your obligations, and I want you to accept responsibility for responding to what happened here in this event in such a way to bring down the negative tone and the violent tone that has become prevalent in society right now. I want you to sense that it's part of your job and your duty to help us to sense that now is the time that we start looking at one another as being co-creators of what America is to become. Listen to the people, become responsive to them, earn their trust. It's not an impossible task. It's only made difficult if you are becoming selfish and you're tuning the people out. If people know that you're listening to them, they know that you are working on their behalf, they're going to be more accepting of, like, if you make a mistake. And as for the other people that were in attendance, those guests, and for all the people that were in the hotel that were disturbed by this circumstance, and all the hotel staff, in the same sense, your innocence has been violated and you're going to have to go through the grieving process as well. But take it with a sense that being blessed to know that nobody actually got hurt to the point where they wouldn't be okay. This is a gift of life. And now you have a very special life experience that you can help to communicate to the rest of us, to help us to understand the necessity and the importance of bringing down the temperature in our rhetoric and to find ways to sort out our differences in more constructive ways. And I hope that you can help to inspire that by being examples and explaining to the rest of us, this sense of like really how it made you feel and what hope it brings to you, knowing that things could have been worse, but they weren't, and be thankful for that. And for everybody who stepped in and performed their duties and role of security, I'm extremely grateful for. Obviously, there were some blind spots that allowed for a breach to reach the point of which it did. But the response and the actions resulted in, tragedy not befalling in the terms of somebody being deeply harmed or losing their life. And that's a gift, that's a blessing, that's definitely something to be grateful for and appreciative of. The response was what helped to save lives. And there's always room for improvement, and I hope that moving forward that everybody understands the blind spots that were there that led to these vulnerabilities that allowed for this situation to get as far as it did. There was a conversation that I listened to coming from an individual that was present at the event and taking it from their perspective, and as they shared their story and detailing and recounting the events as they experienced it. They related a sense of like, while they're there and experiencing that, they were thinking about school children going through an active shooter event and how hard that must be for them to cope with something like that. And if these adults in this room were experiencing fear and uncertainty, how children must be experiencing that type of fear and uncertainty, not having the maturity of understanding, like being able to make more sense of what's going on, having a more sense that they could protect themselves, being able to know that they can trust that they were surrounded by many security guards and capable, able people whose job and duty was to keep them safe. Imagining children just going to school and not being able to have that same sense of safety or capacity to process a traumatizing event as it's happening or to cope with it in the aftermath. Far too many of our children in America experience that type of traumatization. And it's unfortunate that America has become this. But as everything that I have spoken on in this time together, I don't see this as being a complex problem without resolution. I believe there are ways that we can start doing right by the people to create a more safe environment where gun violence isn't so prevalent. I do understand that as gun violence is less prevalent, there's no way to completely eradicate it. What will end up happening is that people will become less sensitized to it. So when it does happen, it will be more painful, more shocking, harder to reconcile. So in a sad and tragic, weird way, we are actually stronger for these things having happened to us. As much as I wish it wasn't the case, we're not doing the things necessary to prevent it right now. So as long as they do happen, they help us to become stronger, more resilient, more robust. It also helps us to become more compassionate and considerate with one another. The nation tends to form at least some sort of unity and bonding and a sense of togetherness in the wake of tragedy. And because of that, I think we have a bit of a blessing that we should be grateful for, that we still have the common humanity and compassion to care enough that when we see one another suffering unnecessarily, that we want to have sympathy, that we want to reach out, that we want to show love and care and concern, and that we're willing to make ourselves more responsive to prevent these things from happening in the future. It's just like the concept of perfecting our union, and the fact that America hasn't been this, perfect nation, but we're a perfecting nation. We're in that becoming process constantly. We've done terrible things in the past, but we're always seeking to improve. And with that sensibility, even when things go wrong, it gives us the chance to start doing things better. It gives us a wake-up call that helps us to understand, this really is how bad it is. And now is the time to start setting things right. So this has become that catalyst for us, this opportunity for us to see the silver lining in this very dark cloud. This is our chance to start making amends, start moving in the right direction. Not in a sense where we forget where we've come from. We need to continuously remember and memorialize and honor and respect and understand that, so that we don't lose it from our conscience, the lived experience of how to justify what we must do in order to live in the terms and conditions that prevent these sorts of things from happening. We need to make sure we don't lose sight of what's important and why we're moving away from those sorts of things. It's why history is important. But we don't hold ourselves back by acting as if we are our past mistakes. We're not our mistakes, but what we choose to do when we make those mistakes. And the important thing moving forward is to just reconfirm with one another this sense of we should never look at one another as being targets or incapable of, sorting out our differences in more constructive ways. political violence, just like any other form of violence, is a symptom of our society having this dysfunction within it that allows for the worst tendencies of people to be brought out in them. You won't be able to alleviate violence altogether because there's still, the passions still exist. You can't, moralize the world through laws and control people's emotions through laws. It's impossible. That's tyranny. Nobody would want for that. It would make us all crazy. But a sense of, we have to foster the right types of conditions that the people, when left to their own devices, will do the right thing. And there's so much room for improvement to create that type of environment, those types of conditions. And our social dialogue is a great place to start in terms of having conversations with one another that is based off of, calling each other out on our bullshit. Yeah. Making sure that bad actors with nefarious intent are not given free passes to just do whatever and not face consequences. But also not approach one another as if we have to constantly be at odds with one another. We don't need to speak about one another as being enemies. We don't have to talk at one another as if, we're on opposing sides. We don't have to look at one another as if, the only way for my existence is if you are not able to exist. Like this sensibility that as if there's no way for us to all just get along. We have to find that common ground to say, like, differences of opinions and traditions and beliefs and ways of seeing the world, like, those are going to come and go, but those are the things that we, explore together, and we discover, like, the differences and the variations of ways of being. But they aren't causes for us to become, violently opposing one another. Like, my ideals have their place in the sun just as much as yours do. The important thing is to make sure that the voices that are condoning or tolerating violence are not given the air of legitimacy, but also respecting that, free speech is fundamentally important. Everybody has to have the capacity to speak their mind. They don't need to necessarily be platformed or legitimized. And when they speak their mind, it's certainly all of our responsibility to push back. If they are trying to lead us astray or to deceive us or to promote, that which would bring out the worst in others. It's a social, moral, ethical, civic responsibility. And in that sense, where if we know that through even just our basic dialogue, we're able to solve our problems, through communication, robust debate, critiquing, and, polite conversation, then we have less need for the use of other forms of resolution. And with that, I'm grateful for your valuable time, attention, and consideration. I know I spoke about this for quite a while, but there's a lot to be said in terms of, while this might just be one isolated event in the grand scheme of things, I mean, it has the same echoes in it of past and prior, events that have had, some connection to violence. It all, comes down to the same thing at the end of the day of, like, what part of ourselves are we going to allow to be expressed? And are we going to help everybody gain a sensibility that there is justice and fairness in the world? And there are ways to set things right when things go wrong. And there are ways to hold people accountable. And the law does work and it is enforceable. So that people don't have to feel like they have to take matters into their own hands and, when left to their own devices. A sense that, the world works for everyone without the disadvantage of anyone, so nobody gets left behind or kept behind. In the sense that, we all have the chance to live the good life. Like, there's no reason for us to come at each other, in this intense way, of leading, through violence. Violence is not the answer. Love is the answer, as they would say. So, speaking on it in, broad and general terms, but also specific to this particular event, helps to reveal a lot of, at least my sensibilities on what happened. I don't think that there is much by way of legitimacy in terms of what POTUS 47 has said on the matter, in a sense of, I have not heard any of the reporting that suggests that what has been said in regards to this event is constructive to uniting the country, to deter future forms of violence, or to use this as an opportunity to unite the country, to prevent the proliferation of violence. And I don't think that there is much surprise to many people that in this time of trouble, we can't count on POTUS 47 to do the right thing. In terms of the suspect, all I can say is that I hope that the graces be with him in this complete error and misjudgment and wrongdoing. I am grateful that they were not able to follow through on what they said they had planned to do. I don't have sympathies for this person. I can find the respects of understanding because I understand human nature and I get the frustrations that many people are feeling. That there's never a time when it's okay to do the wrong thing. And there were so many people that were hurt by this, and ultimately, fundamentally, the entire nation was hurt by this. It was an extremely selfish, self-centered thing to do. And I hope that they seek to redeem themselves. And I believe that the justice system will do its good work to help to establish justice, to ensure that this person is held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. We need to establish justice and restore integrities and send a very clear, resonant message with everyone that this is not okay in America. This is not something that is going to garner you any sort of legitimacy. and that you will be held accountable. I believe it would hold a whole lot more weight of legitimacy, of accountability, of justice if it was coming from a Department of Justice that itself was accountable to the law. But that is a conversation for another day. I hope that all parties involved find healing in their grieving process. I hope that the nation can learn from this the importance of our capacity to solve our differences in more constructive ways, and to realize the necessity for us to really reinforce our unity and our, cohesiveness, and to build up consensus on how to solve our problems and our differences in ways that don't lead to violence. And to ever be the moral voice to say that violence is not the way. And to do whatever we can in terms of forming policy that helps to correct for these things so they don't happen again. And to really work towards helping to make America a place that is worth living in, and that is a safe place, and that is worth defending, so that we can lessen the chance that people would be radicalized against the best interest of our nation. And with that, I'm grateful for your valuable time, attention, and consideration. I hope we all heal from this. I appreciate you. Be well.